What is going on, Steelers Nation? This is Big B, Brian Hanley, and welcome back to Steelers Almighty, man. We have got a good show here today for everybody. You know, today, obviously, we got to talk about Mike Tomlin and his contract extension. So it's something that I think a lot of people weren't sure when it was going to come. I was one of those people that said the same thing. Is it going to come during the season? Is it going to come at all? We'll break a lot of that stuff down today. Next thing is, what are we expecting out of minicamp? You know, what's going on with minicamp? Obviously, the Steelers are in the middle of it right now. And what can we expect to see moving forward during minicamp and how the Steelers can get better? Then next up is a good question. What or are the Steelers, are the expectations based too much on rookies and first-year guys? You know, we got a lot of rookies that are going to be playing a prominent role. Is it too many? You know, we'll break all that down and find out where the Steelers lie with the expectations on these first-year players. And then last but not least, we're going to talk about some improved players on the Steelers. Who do we believe should be some of the improved players? I've got three that I'm going to lay out for you. Obviously, we'll have a poll question at the end. Everybody have their comments at the end of that. We'll break down exactly who we think, or based on those three, who is going to be the most improved player on the Steelers roster this year. So, again, as always, man, weekly, you can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. Always on all the social media platforms, you can find us at Steelers Almighty. And then if you like podcasts and audio is your thing, you can get Steelers Almighty anywhere you get your podcast. So let's dive in here, people, and let's get into the show. So first things first, Mike Tomlin, like we mentioned, gets a new 3-year extension. That contract runs through 2027. You know, I shouldn't say that I was surprised that he got the extension. I thought maybe that the Steelers would be, let's wait and see what happens, you know. Not necessarily a prove-it deal. I mentioned that earlier, and y'all got all over me about a prove-it deal. What does Mike Tomlin have to prove? I'm not saying he has to prove anything. All I'm saying is he has been there 17 years, and, you know, there's some, based on some recent play, how the Steelers have played, how the seasons have progressed recently, there's some angst. So, you know, that's why I had the feelings of the way that I did. But he got the extension. You know, first off, let's talk about Mike Tomlin from the very beginning. I mean, in 2007, when he initially became the coach, I mean, he was following some legends. First of all, we didn't even know who he was. I've been following the Steelers. I had no clue who Mike Tomlin was. So I was very apprehensive when he got the job. Following Chuck Noll, following Bill Cowher, and the success that both of those coaches have had, championship success, I might add. You know, bringing this unknown guy in, unproven head coach in, you know, I had my angst. But as we see, he has become the highest percentage or winningest coach percentage-wise in Steelers history. You know, that has happened. And whether some people like that or not, that's just a true statement. Let's break down some of the things that he's done. You know, he's won 7 division titles. He's won 2 AFC championships. You know, he has won a Super Bowl. I know there's going to be a lot of people out there that scream, well, he won the Super Bowl with Bill Cowher's players. I'm not even going to deny that. But on the flip side of that, the year before Bill Cowher was there, they didn't even make the playoffs in Bill Cowher's last year. So let's keep that in mind when we're talking about Mike Tomlin. I get that he didn't put the team in place, but he had to coach them. And the last time Cowher coached that team, they didn't make the playoffs. So, you know, Mike's done a good job. You know, Mike Tomlin has done an outstanding job. Now, let's talk about some of the things that he hasn't done and some of the reasons on why a lot of people have the feelings about Mike Tomlin that they do. Look, having the winning season, 17 straight seasons of winning or not having a losing season, that's great. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. No, first of all, nobody else has done it. I go, so that's one thing, but that is a great accomplishment. However, what have you done? You know, because let's just break it down again. The last 7 years, no playoff wins. Well, it's not like the Steelers have gone to the playoffs every single season, because in my eyes, and I know a lot of you Steeler fans' minds, it's like, you know what? Give me a couple of 5-win seasons or whatever the case may be. Get a higher draft pick. If we're not going to make the playoffs, fine. I'm okay with that. But at the same time, win me some playoff games. Get me to a Super Bowl. Get me to an AFC championship game. The years that we're not making the playoffs, I'm not going to be mad, if we were 5-12, 5-11, whatever the case may be, depending on what year and how many games we were playing that year. Okay, yeah, the season would have stunk, but at the same time, we get a higher draft pick. We didn't make the playoffs anyway. But if I could make that trade-off between getting to a Super Bowl and getting to an AFC championship game, I'd make that trade-off. And I think a lot of you out there, whether you admit it or not, I think you guys would make that trade-off too. Yes. So, yeah, in the last 7 years, look, they just haven't been good. And when I say haven't been good, we haven't been good enough to win playoff games, or we haven't won playoff games. I shouldn't say haven't been good enough, because I think we were plenty good enough, at least in a few of those years. We just haven't done it. And that's what the disappointing part is. Look, you break it down even further. You go to the last 4 seasons, the Steelers, look at this graph that I've got pulled up here. 2020, the COVID year, it started off outstanding, if y'all remember, 11-0, and then it ended horrendously by getting our head beaten in at home in a playoff game to the Cleveland Browns. But other than that, you look at those next 3 years, hey, we made the playoffs a couple of those years. We did. But we also got outscored, which is ridiculous. Now, look at last year. 324 points is not a ton of points for somebody to score against you. And Mike Tomlin has his hand all over that defense. Although Terrell Austin is the defensive coordinator, look, Mike Tomlin's got his fingerprint on the game plan, the play calls. He's got his fingerprints all over that. He also has his fingerprints on the offense, too. And he hired Matt Canada. And he kept Matt Canada on staff for as long as he did, and he didn't have to do that. Number one, he didn't have to hire him. Number two, he didn't have to keep him. But he did all of that, and we suffered because of that on the offensive side. So there are a lot of things that Mike Tomlin has done great, and he needs to be praised for. But there's still some things that Mike Tomlin has not done well that we need to see something better. I think this might be the start. Changing his philosophy on how the Steelers win is also another start. Look, I understand we want to run the football, and that's good. I mean, we should want to run the football, but you got to be able to score some points. You can't just continue to say, okay, we're going to play outstanding defense. We're going to play good special teams. We're going to do just enough on offense and make a play at the end and win games. You can win some games that way, but you're not winning in the playoffs that way. That's not how it works. You got to be able to score some points. I'm not saying you got to go out there and score 35, 40 points every game. I'm not saying that, but you got to be in the ball game. You got to be able to score 20, 25 points. You got to be able to throw the ball down the field. You got to do that kind of stuff. And I think leaning towards Arthur Smith, who's going to have such more of an imagination on offense, it's not even funny. I think that's a step in the right direction. I also believe Omar Khan kind of putting his fingerprint on, number one, the draft, but also saying, okay, coach, look, we got to be able to do this, this, and this. I'm going to get you these guys, but we need somebody who can take advantage of the talents that they have. And Matt Canada wasn't taking advantage of the talents that he had. So we got somebody else in here. I think it's a good look. I like Mike Tomlin this season. Look, the Rooneys came out and said they think he's a big part of the future. I understand that. Having some familiarity and continuity moving forward in the future, I think that's great. But the one thing to keep in mind, because he got that 3-year extension, that does not mean that Mike Tomlin still cannot be fired. Let's keep that in mind. I understand that the Steelers don't fire coaches, but they ran off Chuck Noll. That happened. Now, Bill Cowher didn't get run off. He retired. I get that part. But if the Steelers fall flat on their face, there's nothing to say that the Rooneys can't turn around and say, you know what, this isn't working anymore. We've got to move on. I don't want it to happen. I hope it doesn't happen, because that means my team isn't very good. And the Steeler fans, we're going to be upset because the team stinks. There'll be some people that are glad that Tomlin's gone. That is what it is. We can't change that. But at the same time, I think this can be a special Steelers team. So I want the team to do well this year. let's move on, people. Next thing we've got coming up here, Steelers minicamp. What are we looking at as far as the Steelers? What do we think should happen with minicamp? First thing to break down is, what's the difference between minicamp and OTAs? Because they look a lot alike. I mean, there's no pads, nobody's hitting each other, but what are some of the differences in minicamp, and what are we looking forward to? So let's start out with some of the differences. First thing is, OTAs are mostly drills. It's a first look at a lot of the players out there, and just kind of not going through the motions, but just sending people, let's watching them do drills, not any one-on-ones or anything like that, just getting acquainted with everybody. For veterans that come to OTAs, seeing what kind of shape that guys are in, whether they're in good shape, trying to work back into shape, doing that, just basically getting people and their body into doing football activities. Whether they were doing that or not, working out on their own, that's something totally different. But this gets them more back into a routine of things. More organized practice is what a mini camp is, because it is a practice. There's the installation of offense and defense that are going in. Plays are actually being run. There's a lot more team drills, a lot more 7-on-7. More importantly, there's a lot more 11-on-11 that gets done at mini camp. So you're going to start to see some of the installation stuff that happens there. And it's kind of a miniature version of training camp, just no hitting. Guys are out there getting after it. Don't get me wrong, in mini camp. But again, no pads. So they're thudding up, but again, no pads on. But it's a little bit more physical, I would say, than what a OTA practice is. But it's still just a mini camp. But those are kind of the differences. Mini camp, they're trying to pinpoint some stuff down, put plays in, running against good on good. Again, even though it's just in pads, you're still going good on good. So that's a little bit of the differences there. Now, what are the Steelers looking for? Well, the Steelers got to look for a couple of different things. First off, let's start here. Got to find a slot corner. Looks like we've signed one in Cam Sutton. So hopefully that is the guy that can lock down that position. I believe that it is, I shouldn't say regardless of what his legal issue is. If he can get past his legal issue, I think what the Steelers have going on at slot corner, make sure that that's a position. But even still, we saw what happened to our secondary last year with injuries, man. We have got to have some depth. So building depth behind that, but the number one for me, they got to find a slot corner. Right behind that, or maybe it's neck and neck, I think we got to have a number 2 receiver. The easy thing with the number 2 receiver would be if Roman Wilson just won the job. Wouldn't that be easy, guys? We wouldn't have to hear about all these rumors of Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel, Courtland Sutton, Traylon Burks, signing Michael Thomas. We wouldn't have to hear any of that if Roman Wilson was just good enough to go win the job. Well, let's find out if he is. Now, in a mini camp, I don't know that you're going to be able to do that because it's only 3 days. Training camp, I think we're going to find out a little bit more. But that is the easy thing. But if he's not able to do that, if he's not, able to just lock down that position, then we got to be able to find not only a number 2 receiver, but then a slot receiver on top of that. So I think that's a neck and neck with slot corner, is finding another 2 receiver. Next thing is, I think we got to develop some offensive line depth. We can't have enough good offensive linemen, man. You just can't. We want to build depth in every single Steelers position. Clearly, you need that because injuries are going to happen. Although we don't want them to happen, it's football. They're going to happen no matter what we say or do. Having said that, yeah, let's find some good depth, on the offensive line. And I think the Steelers are on their way to do that. Last thing that I think, let's create some offensive continuity. And what I mean by that, we've got new quarterbacks. We've got a new offensive system. So use minicamp to get the quarterback center exchange. Heck, the quarterback cadence. All those things are different. We've got a couple of different quarterbacks. Their cadence are going to be different. So those kinds of things that you have to get down. And I mentioned the quarterback center exchange, whether it's under center or in shotgun. You got to get those kinds of things down. a new running game, find out the running fits. This is where the offensive line can start to gel. This is where the running backs can also start to gel with the offensive line and find out, okay, what do they do well? Where's the holes going to be based on this play, this run scheme? A lot of those things, you're starting to implement a lot of that stuff, and then getting the quarterbacks outside the pocket and even a Justin Fields package, figuring out all those things. What's the scramble drill? What are the quarterbacks doing in the scramble drill? Where should the wide receivers go? How should the offensive line react to scramble drills? Stuff like that. This is what mini camp is good for. Again, it's not a lot of hitting. There's no hitting because there's no pads, but you can start to put some of this stuff together because, again, it's going to be very, very important to moving forward and finding out about this. So, the question here that I have for you guys and put it in the poll, and the one before I didn't mention, I'm going to bring this back up. I apologize. Mike Tomlin, do you think that it was good that the Steelers, whether the Steelers gave him that extension now? Put your comments in the poll or in the comments, or put your answers in the comments. Jiminy Christmas, I apologize. Put your answers in the comments there, and let's get that figured out. Next thing here, Steelers and minicamp. What are you guys looking forward to the most? What are you looking forward to the Steelers finding out in minicamp? Put any answers or any comments in the comments section. Let's move on here, people. So a lot of the Steelers' expectations this year, they are built around rookies. So my question to you guys, are the goals too dependent on rookies and their contributions? I mean, that's a tough question, man. I mean, look, rookies are always going to be counted on in every league to contribute. That's just the nature of the business. But the Steelers have them at a couple of key positions. Let's take a look at it. First off, Troy Fautanu, left tackle. Now, the one thing about him, I don't worry about him as much because, number one, he's so athletic. He's so strong. He's so physical at the point of attack. Not to mention, there have been a lot of first-year left tackles come in and play well. And with the coaching that he's going to receive and the system that he's going to be in, not to mention his other offensive linemen, that number one, Broderick Jones is a second-year guy, can kind of teach him a little bit of the ropes. Isaac Siamala playing right next to him. I don't worry about Fautanu nearly as much. I don't worry about him. You get in there, you do your thing at left tackle. Don't get me wrong. It's an incredibly tough position to play. I just don't worry about that as much, but he's still a rookie. And we're depending on him to play left tackle with right-handed quarterbacks. Line side, that's an issue, or it can be an issue. And the Steelers are really dependent on him to play well. Next up, Zach Frazier. Now, look, man, the center got a lot of responsibility. I mean, and it doesn't matter whether you're a rookie or a 10-year veteran. You're basically the second quarterback on the field. Your job, setting line protections, seeing things that a quarterback can't see pre-snap, making sure that where the Mike linebacker, you hear that a million times a game. 52's the Mike, 48's the Mike, whatever the case may be. Constantly setting the protection and understanding what's going on. Yeah, that's what a center has to do. And as a rookie, you're already trying to learn assignments, having to learn on top of that too. It can make it more difficult. Now, the one thing about Zach Frazier is he's got a lot of experience at the position. This is not a Kendrick Green situation where he's moving over to center, where he's never played center before. One of the worst decisions that the Steelers, I think, have made maybe in the last 15 to 20 years, putting a guy at center on an already shaky line that has never played center before, I think, in his life. That horrible decision. We're not doing that here with Zach Frazier. A ton of experience, and not to mention playing outstanding football at West Virginia. So again, while he's got a lot, as long as he can learn, the assignments, everything else should come okay with him. So again, it's a worry because he's still a rookie. He can still be tricked. Heck, 10-year veterans can still be tricked. But at the same time, he's got experience at the position. But the Steelers are dependent, again, at a key position on the offensive line. Basically, the leader of the offensive line is a first-year player. It could be troublesome. Now, next, I know I talked about this earlier, Roman Wilson. I just think he's got to win the number 2 spot. You know, we could go out and trade for a guy and give up some draft capital and go get a guy, depending on how much you're wanting to do. I'm not in the trade for Brandon Ayuk camp. I know there's a lot of Steeler fans that say, hey, we got to spend some money on offense. $30 million is too much. The Steelers shouldn't do that, especially giving up a second or a first round pick for if it's a first and a third or a second and fourth. No. I just think it's easier if Roman Wilson can lock up the job and play well. Not just, okay, he's got the job out of necessity. No, I don't mean that. I'm talking about if he goes out and wins the job. Yeah, that makes the most sense. But again, he's a rookie. And we've seen it from time to time. It takes receivers a little bit to get used to playing the professional game. You know, guys are not near as physical in college. Although you can be a little bit more handsy in college at the cornerback position, the guys just aren't as physical. Their technique isn't near as good. Where here, guys will jam you at the line of scrimmage and your route is over at the National Football League. So he's got to understand how to get off of that. He did play in the slot an awful lot at Michigan, but he can still play outside. I think the Steelers drafted him to be the number 2, an outside receiver, and not just play in the slot. If he can do that, that would be outstanding, like I've mentioned. But it's a big if because, again, he's a rookie. And we never know with rookies, man. We just don't. And those are top rookies right there that we are depending on all 3 of those positions to be something. Last but not least, Payton Wilson. I mean, I've raved about this guy because I think he was the steal of the entire draft. Getting the number 1 linebacker that we were able to get that late in the 3rd round. Yeah, injury history be damned. The guy is a player. He is a playmaker. Not only can he make plays on the inside, he can make plays on the outside. And I've said it since the day he got drafted. I think he needs to be the starting inside linebacker next to Patrick Queen. I know we got Cole Holcomb and we love him. I know we got a Landon Roberts and he's a thumper. But we've seen, number 1, Holcomb is injured off that horrible knee injury. Not sure he's going to be back at 100% in time to be on the field. And we saw Landon Roberts struggle in protection. That's just, or not in protection, but pass coverage. That's something that Payton Wilson's just not going to do. I mean, he's way more athletic. His upside is just tremendous. And he also makes plays going downhill. He can also line up on the outside. Let's just say we want a package to where we move TJ Watt inside and we've got Payton Wilson. Maybe we line him up on the inside coming as a linebacker. Or maybe we bring Nick Herbig and we put him there and line up. There's just a multitude of things that this guy can do. His upside is tremendous, you know, especially in a dime or nickel package. I love him being on the field. But again, he's a rookie. And that's a lot of responsibility that we want to put on a rookie. A lot of times you just want them to, oh, hey, here's your responsibility. Just go until they get up to speed. So my philosophy is get them out there, let them make the mistakes. But, you know, the Steelers may have other plans. I just believe a guy like that with his ability, his athletic ability, we got to get him on the field sooner than later. So just think about that for a second. Fautanu, Frazier, Wilson and Wilson. Yeah, those guys, it's a lot of expectations that you're putting on rookies, you know, at key positions, especially on the offensive line. The one thing that I will say about it, plugging those guys into play right now, that makes the offensive line better than what it was last year. I think everybody knows that. So while I can be worried, and maybe a lot of Steeler fans out there are worried, but that they are rookies, they're better than the guys, at least athletically. They're better than what our line was last year. Roman Wilson, we'll see. Deontay Johnson was pretty good. You know, he was a head case. He had a lack of intensity. Let's just call it that, you know, on certain plays, taking way too many plays off, didn't give the effort. But when he did, he was pretty good. So those are pretty good, big shoes to fill, especially if we're not going to go out and get us a wide receiver number 2. Roman Wilson's got a lot to fill. And then Payton Wilson, just being a playmaker that he's been his entire career at NC State when he was healthy. Hopefully he can stay healthy and the same thing can happen. So that's a lot of expectations on rookies. I would ask you this one last question here as far as the expectations for the rookies. Who do you believe is going to be the most impact rookie on the Steelers this year? Leave that question or your answers in the comments. Let's move on here, people. So we talked about this, the most improved player for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Who is in line to be that? Well, I've got three people that I've got picked out here. The first one, and this is no surprise. Everybody has talked about this guy having to have a bigger role with the Steelers, and that's Darnell Washington. I know he slid in the draft because he had a knee injury. And I know there's been some reports that his knee's still not 100%, and it's probably never going to be 100%. But I saw him making plays at Georgia with that same knee injury. So I think he's got a lot more that he brings to the table. Now, look, him being an extra blocker, as you can see, he can dominate at the point of attack. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. The guy is a monster blocking. Big, strong, physical. He can blow you off the line of scrimmage. He can also get out in space, get to the second level as a blocker. So you got to use him as that. But he's more than capable of what the Steelers used him last year. He can do more than that. He's not just a guy, hey, we're play side, one side, we're going to bootleg out and dump off to a 2 or 3 yard gain, on the backside. He can do more than that. He can get out in space and catch the ball in space. He can also be a gigantic red zone target, getting open in the red zone. Somebody that even if he's a decoy where people just have to cover him, throw him the ball every now and then. I think he can do more than that. And I think in this offense where we're going to see a lot more imagination, I think Darnell Washington is going to be a guy that gets a bigger role. Again, he doesn't have to go out and have 50 catches a game. Pat Freiermuth is there, But in what we're trying to do, I believe he's got to have a bigger role. He's going to have a huge role in the blocking game, or in the run game, and with his blocking. Absolutely, he's going to have that. But when it comes to the passing game, I think his role is going to increase. That's going to be good for the Steelers. I like that. Put Darnell Washington down as a guy to watch for most improved for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And the next guy, I mentioned him earlier, Nick Herbig. Yeah, I like Nick Herbig. 3 sacks last year. With what he's capable of doing, I wouldn't be surprised if he doesn't double that this year. Now, granted, he's a backup. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. TJ Watt, in my opinion, the best defensive player in the league. Alex Highsmith, one of the best pass rushers in the league. He also plays the run well. He's playing behind those guys, and they're going to get the overwhelming majority of the snaps. But we know this Pittsburgh Steelers defense. We know how it works. You have to have guys to give those guys a spell. They can't be if it's 100 plays, they can't be out there 85 plays and thinking that we're going to get quality production out of that. No, you've got to have guys that are capable of coming into the game and giving them a spell with the defense not dropping off near as much. I think Nick Herbig is that guy. A little bit more strength, a little bit more athleticism. He brings that to the table. Again, I thought he had a pretty good year last year, but I think his role is going to be expanded this year. Like I mentioned before, in a nickel or a dime package, maybe you slide Highsmith or Watt inside. You put him on the outside and let him rush. Or maybe you even have him being a middle linebacker, an inside linebacker, rushing from that position. Who knows? He can do a lot. He did a lot at Wisconsin. I think he can do even more here with Pittsburgh. I just like Nick Herbig's upside. I like it. I think it's going to be good for the Steelers. I think he's a guy that everybody needs to keep their eyes on moving forward. So keep your eyes on Nick Herbig. The last guy, Calvin Austin III. We talked a lot about number 2 receivers. Now, having Calvin Austin III being on this list, it requires something from other people for him to have the kind of breakout year. Because if Roman Wilson does not win the number 2 job, I believe the Steelers are going to go out and get somebody to be the number 2 receiver, which is going to drop Wilson down in the pecking order, which means he'll be the slot receiver. Well, if he's the slot receiver, then Calvin Austin, what's he going to be, the 4th guy? Well, how many catches is the 4th guy going to have on a season? 7? So that's not really impactful. But if Roman Wilson can lock down that spot, I think this is Calvin Austin's job to lose. I think the Steelers like him. I think that he's got the ability to have a breakout year if he can be the slot receiver. Again, we were going to have an offensive coordinator that's going to have a lot more imagination. Yeah, he's going to get some reverses. He's going to get some jet sweeps that are going to go to him. But I also think he's going to get some over routes coming out of the slot, underneath routes coming out of the slot, some seam routes coming out of the slot. You already know that he can take the top off of a defense. We've seen that several times from him. So there's going to be a lot of different things that he's going to have the opportunity to do within this offense if he locks down that position, which I believe he's got the upper hand in doing. But again, I think that is reliant on another guy's position, the number 2 receiver, if Roman Wilson can lock that down. If he does, Calvin Austin has a breakout season. So put him on the list as well. So of those 3 guys, the big poll question again, who do you think will be the most improved Steeler in 2024? Darnell Washington, Nick Herbig, or Calvin Austin III? Put your comments and your answers in the comments section. We appreciate everybody in this poll question. So, wrapping this thing up, man, the expectations this year are the same as always. I mean, we're Steeler fans. You know how that is. It's Super Bowl or bust. It is Super Bowl or bust. We don't want to hear about making the playoffs. We don't want to hear about, we've won the division or any. We want to win a Super Bowl. But I think more importantly, we want to make sure that when the playoff comes, that number 1, we're in it, but number 2, that we have an opportunity to win. And the last few times the Steelers have been in the playoffs, it's like, okay, we got here, but we have no chance to win this game. And we didn't win it. And we got whipped. Well, last year we didn't get whipped. And the game was pretty close to the end. But I don't think there was any realistic Steeler fans that thought we were going to win that football game. That's just a fact. Well, we don't want that as Steeler fans. We want to be in the hunt. We've got to have an opportunity to say, you know what? No matter who we line up against, we can go win this football game. That's what we're looking for. So the expectations this year are the same as they always been. They're heavy. They're great. But that's part of being the Steelers, man. That's just the way that it is. It's just the way that it is. You can find the Steelers, like I mentioned, weekly on YouTube at youtube.com/Steelers Almighty. And if you prefer a podcast, anywhere you get a podcast, Steelers Almighty is available. Thanks, everybody, for joining us. Remember to like, follow, subscribe, comment, hit that notification bell so you know when the next episode comes out. We appreciate you guys. We love you guys. Till next time, aloha.